"Mom, I need you to handle Christmas dinner this year. It'll be 15 people from Mark's family, and you know how you cook." Sarah's voice sounded casual over the phone, as if she were asking Eleanor Vance to pick up milk from the grocery store. Eleanor, 72 years old, felt the world pause for a moment as she processed her daughter's words. 72 years of life, 45 years of marriage, 30 years a widow, and now this. 15 people. Sarah. "And why do I have to take care of everything?" Eleanor asked, gripping the phone until her knuckles turned white. From the other end of the line, she heard Sarah sigh impatiently, like a spoiled child throwing a tantrum. "Oh, Mom, because you have free time. We work all day. Besides, Mark's house is too small to host his entire family. Yours is perfect. It has that big dining room and spacious kitchen. And let's be honest, no one cooks turkey like you do." Eleanor closed her eyes and leaned against her kitchen wall, the same kitchen where she had prepared thousands of meals for Sarah when she was little, where she had waited up when Sarah came home late from teenage parties, where she had cried silently after her husband's funeral. It was as if her daughter had completely forgotten who was the mother and who was the daughter. "Sarah, honey, I'm not a domestic worker. I'm your mother." "Please, Mom, don't be dramatic. It's just a family dinner. You can buy everything, and I'll give you the money afterward. Mark already talked to his mom, Brenda, and she's bringing the desserts. You just need to take care of the main course, side dishes, appetizers, and clean the house before and after. You know, the usual." The usual. Eleanor felt a bitter laugh rise in her throat. When had it become normal for her to be the servant of her own family? When had she accepted being treated as if her time, her energy, her dignity were worth nothing? "And Mom, one more thing. Mark's family is a bit particular about food. Nothing too spicy. Aunt Carol can't eat gluten, Cousin Matthew is vegetarian, and Mark's grandma only eats very well-done meat. Oh, and we need red wine, but not too expensive because it's a lot of money in the end." Eleanor remained silent, feeling each word from Sarah like a slap. It wasn't just the Christmas dinner. It was a lifetime of small humiliations that had accumulated like raindrops into a storm. It was the 15 people, said so naturally, as if preparing food for 15 demanding strangers was as simple as boiling water for tea. "And what are you going to do, Sarah, while I'm cooking for your husband's entire family?" "Oh, Mom, I'll be there helping, of course. I don't know. I'll set the table and serve the drinks. Mark will be busy tending to his family. You know how these family gatherings are." Eleanor felt something break inside her chest. It wasn't her heart. It was something deeper. It was her patience, her infinite capacity to say yes, her need to be the perfect mother who never caused problems. For 72 years, she had been the woman who solved everything, adapted to everything, who smiled even when her world was falling apart. "Sarah, I have a question for you. When was the last time Mark and his family invited me to something? When was the last time they treated me like the grandmother of their future children and not as the free domestic worker?" "Mom, don't start that. They appreciate you very much. It's just, well, you know how Mark is with his things. He's shy." Shy. Mark, who had never had trouble borrowing money when he needed to fix his car. Mark, who had never been shy about letting Eleanor pay for dinner when the four of them went out together. Mark, who had never been shy about using her house as a free hotel when his parents visited from out of town. "All right, Sarah, I understand perfectly." Eleanor's voice had changed. It no longer sounded like the usual understanding and available mother. It sounded cold, calculated, different. Sarah seemed to notice because her tone became sweeter, more manipulative. "That means yes, Mom? You'll take care of everything? I promise it's going to be a beautiful Christmas, and everyone will remember how amazing you are at cooking." Eleanor looked out her kitchen window at the garden she had cared for decades, the roses she had planted when Sarah was a child, the rusty swing where she had pushed her granddaughter, who now lived in another city and barely called. Her whole world had become small, reduced to being useful to others. "Sarah, my love, I have news for you. Your husband and his relatives are coming for Christmas. Perfect. Then I'm going on a trip, and you can take care of everyone because I'm not a babysitter, much less an employee." The silence on the other end of the phone was deafening. Eleanor could almost hear her daughter's panicked thoughts. She imagined Sarah's pale face, her eyes wide with horror at the possibility of having to organize a dinner for 15 demanding people herself. "What? Mom, you can't be serious. A trip? Where? With whom? Mom, this is ridiculous. Everything is already planned." "Everything is planned by you, Sarah, without asking me if I wanted to be part of those plans." Eleanor hung up the phone with trembling hands and stared at the receiver as if it were a strange object. For the first time in decades, she had said no. For the first time in her life, she had set boundaries, and the feeling was as terrifying as it was liberating. She walked slowly toward her living room, where photographs of a lifetime watched her from the shelves. There was Sarah at 5 years old, in her pink polka dot dress, smiling toothlessly in the garden. There was her late husband, Robert, handsome and young in his military uniform, before life hit them with bills, illnesses, and disappointments. There were photos of Sarah's first Christmases, when Eleanor believed that being a mother was all she needed to be happy. When had all this begun? When had she stopped being Eleanor, the woman with her own dreams and desires, to become simply Sarah's mom? She remembered the day Robert died 30 years ago. Sarah was barely 15 years old, and Eleanor promised herself that she would be both father and mother, that her daughter would never lack anything, and she kept that promise. She worked double shifts at the factory until her hands became rough and her shoulders stooped. She sold her wedding jewelry to pay for Sarah's college. She gave up the possibility of falling in love again because Sarah needed stability. She swallowed her loneliness for 30 years because her daughter was the most important thing. When Sarah married Mark 5 years ago, Eleanor thought she could finally live a little for herself, that her daughter, now adult and established, would no longer need so much from her. How naive she had been. The first favor came 2 months after the wedding. "Mom, can you lend us $2,000 for the down payment on Mark's car? We'll pay you back next month." Next month never came, but more favors did. "Mom, can you watch the house while we're on a late honeymoon in Cancun?" "Mom, can you host Mark's parents when they visit? Our house is too small." And Eleanor always said yes, always smiled, always available. She walked to her bedroom and opened her nightstand drawer, where she kept her important documents. There was the notebook where she recorded all family expenses. For years, she had kept meticulous records, not out of distrust, but out of habit as a working woman who knew the value of every cent. The numbers hit her like a punch to the stomach. In the last 5 years, she had spent over $15,000 on Sarah and Mark. $15,000 that had come from her pension, from her lifelong savings, from the money she had saved for her own medical expenses when she got older. Mark's birthday dinner, $10, Sarah's car repair, $800, Christmas shopping for the whole family, $950, flights for Sarah and Mark to visit the in-laws, $600, Sarah's rent when Mark lost his job, $1,200 for 3 months. And never, not once had they asked how she was, if she needed anything, if she had enough money for her medications, or to fix the leaky roof that she had been ignoring for 2 years, because she preferred to prioritize Sarah's emergencies. She sat on the edge of her bed and for the first time in years allowed herself to cry. She didn't cry out of sadness. She cried out of rage. Rage at Sarah for taking her for granted. Rage at Mark for treating her like a free domestic worker. But most of all, rage at herself for letting this happen. The phone rang. It was Sarah again. "Mom, please, you can't do this to me. I already told Mark you were going to cook. He already invited his whole family. What am I going to do now? I don't even know how to cook for so many people." "Learn," Eleanor replied with a calm she didn't know she possessed. "Mom, this is absurd. Cancel that ridiculous trip. Where are you going to go alone? With what money? Let's be realistic. You can't travel alone at your age." At her age. As if being 72 had automatically turned her into an invalid who needed permission to make her own decisions. as if being a grandmother forced her to forever give up being a woman with her own desires. "Sarah, I have enough money to travel. The same money I've been spending on you for years." "What are you talking about? We've never asked you for money." The lie was so blatant that Eleanor felt nauseous. Had Sarah really forgotten all the loans she never repaid, or had she simply decided they didn't count because they came from her mother? "Sarah, I have all the receipts, all the proof. Every cent I've spent on you for 5 years is documented." Silence. Then Sarah's voice, smaller, more insecure. "Mom, that's different. We're family? Families help each other." "You're right, my love. Families help each other. When was the last time you helped me?" More silence. Eleanor knew Sarah was desperately doing a mental inventory, trying to remember some gesture of generosity toward her mother. She wouldn't find it because it didn't exist. "I'm always here for you, Mom. I always call you. You call me when you need something. There's a difference." The truth hung in the air like an accusation. Eleanor got up and walked to her window, looking at the street where she had lived for 40 years. The same street where she had raised Sarah, where she had mourned Robert's death, where she had grown old, waiting for someone to treat her with the respect she deserved. "Tomorrow I'm going to the travel agency," she finally said, "and you're going to have to figure it out yourself." That night, Eleanor couldn't sleep. She lay awake staring at her bedroom ceiling, listening to the familiar sounds of her house, the hum of the old refrigerator, the persistent drip from the bathroom she had never fixed because there was always something more urgent to pay for, the creak of the old timbers settling with the years. At 3 a.m, she got up and walked to the kitchen. She brewed a cup of chamomile tea, the same kind she used to make Sarah when she was little, and had nightmares. How ironic that now it was she who had nightmares, but her nightmares were real and had names. They were called ingratitude, emotional abuse, and the terrible feeling of having wasted 30 years of her life being the person everyone needed, but no one valued. She sat at the kitchen table with her steaming cup and began to remember. Not the sweet memories she had been feeding for years, but the others, the ones she had buried deep because they hurt too much. She remembered the first time Sarah had made her feel small. It was 3 years ago at her neighbor's baby shower. Sarah had arrived late, as always, and when someone commented on how elegant Eleanor looked in her new dress, Sarah had said, "Oh yes, Mom bought new clothes. I hope she didn't spend too much. You know how old people are with money." Old people. As if being old was synonymous with being irresponsible. As if her 72 years of experience working and managing money meant nothing compared to Sarah's 28 years living from favor to favor. She remembered the day Mark had eaten at her house for the first time when he had just started dating Sarah. Eleanor had cooked for hours. Chicken in green sauce, saffron rice, refried beans, handmade tortillas, 3 different types of salsa. Mark had eaten without looking up from his plate, without a thank you or a "this is delicious." In the end, he had audibly burped and said, "It's all right, but my mom Brenda puts more chili in hers." Sarah had laughed. Her own daughter had laughed at the insult to her mother. She remembered all the Christmases when she had cooked for 10, 12, 15 people from Mark's family while they sat in her living room watching television and criticizing everything. The house was too cold, the music too loud, the decorations too simple, and Sarah never defended her. Never. She remembered the day she had to go to the emergency room because she had deeply cut her hand while cooking for Mark's birthday. Sarah had arrived at the hospital 2 hours later, not because she had been busy, but because she had been at the beauty salon. "Oh, Mom, was all that drama necessary? It's just a few stitches." Just a few stitches, as if her mother's pain was always just something insignificant. She remembered when she had sold Robert's engagement ring, the only valuable keepsake she had of her late husband, to lend Sarah $3,000 when Mark had lost his job. Sarah had promised to pay her back in 3 months. That had been 2 years ago. She remembered the time she had been sick with the flu for a week, so ill she could barely get out of bed. And Sarah hadn't come to see her even once. But the same day she felt better, Sarah had called her to ask her to water the plants at her house because they were going on a romantic weekend getaway. And she remembered, with a clarity that surprised her, the exact moment when she had stopped being a person to become a function. It had been the day of Aunt Helen Vance's funeral, Robert's sister. Eleanor had been crying because she terribly missed her sister-in-law, with whom she had shared so many years of confidences and laughs. Sarah had approached, but not to comfort her. She had approached to whisper in her ear, "Mom, stop crying so much. People will think you're overreacting. Besides, I need you to go early tomorrow to pick up my dress from the dry cleaner. I need you to go." Not could you or would you mind. I need you to go, as one tells an employee. Her tea had grown cold in her hands, but Eleanor hadn't noticed. She was too busy processing 30 years of small deaths, small humiliations, moments when she had swallowed her dignity to maintain family peace. The phone rang again. It was 4 a.m. "Mom, are you awake? I can't sleep thinking about this. Mark is furious with me. He says, how am I going to sort out dinner? His parents already bought their plane tickets. You can't do this to me." Sarah's voice sounded desperate, but Eleanor no longer felt the automatic urge to rescue her. For the first time in her life, her daughter's problems sounded like problems her daughter had created and that her daughter could solve. "Sarah, it's 4 a.m. "I know, but I just can't sleep. Mom, please, let's be reasonable. We can find a solution. What if I pay for all the ingredients? What if I help you more in the kitchen?" As if the problem was the amount of help and not the fundamental fact that they had planned to use her house, her time, her energy, and her money without even asking if she agreed. "Sarah, the solution is very simple. Have dinner at your house." "But our house is too small." "Then rent a hall." "That costs money." "And my time, my house, and my work don't cost money, do they?" Silence. A long, heavy silence that held 30 years of unspoken truths. "Mom, I don't know what's wrong with you lately. You're being very strange, very selfish." Selfish. The word every woman who dares to set boundaries hears sooner or later. The word used to make women feel guilty for having their own needs. "Sarah, I'm hanging up now, and don't call me again until you found a solution that doesn't involve me." "Mom." Eleanor hung up the phone and unplugged it from the wall. The silence that followed was the most beautiful she had heard in years. The next morning, Eleanor woke up with a strange feeling in her chest. At first, she thought it was anxiety, but after a few minutes, she realized it was something she hadn't felt in decades. Freedom. For the first time in 30 years, she didn't have to wonder what Sarah needed, what problems she had to solve, what sacrifice she had to make. She dressed carefully, choosing her favorite cream blouse, the one Sarah always criticized, saying it made her look too old. She combed her hair in front of the mirror and for the first time in years truly looked at herself, not to look for wrinkles or gray hairs to conceal, but to recognize herself. There stood Eleanor Vance, 72 years old, widow, mother, but above all, a woman. She walked towards downtown with firm steps. Every block she covered felt like a declaration of independence. The travel agency was on Main Street, between the pharmacy where she bought her medications and the bakery where she had bought bread every day for 40 years. "Good morning, ma'am. How can I help you?" The young woman behind the counter had a genuine smile, not the forced smile Eleanor had learned to recognize in people who saw her only as someone's grandmother. "I want to take a trip for Christmas." "How wonderful. Do you have a destination in mind? Are you traveling with family?" "I'm traveling alone, and I want to go as far away from here as possible." The agent, whose name was Emily Miller according to her badge, showed no surprise or pity. She simply opened her computer and began to show her options. "We have some beautiful packages for solo travelers. Are you interested in beaches, mountains, historic cities?" Eleanor looked at the photographs Emily showed her: white sand beaches in Cancun, snowy mountains in Switzerland, cobblestone streets in Spain. For years, she had only seen these places in magazines she flipped through in the doctor's waiting room, thinking they were dreams for other people, for people who had the right to be happy. "How much money are you planning to spend?" Emily asked gently. Eleanor thought of the $15,000 she had documented in her notebook. $15,000 she had given without thinking, without asking for anything in return, believing that love was bought with sacrifice. "I have $5,000, she said. And as she said it, she realized it was the first time in years she was talking about her money, not the money she had to set aside for Sarah's emergencies. Emily smiled more broadly. "With $5,000, we can do something incredible. How about a tour of Spain and Italy, 3 weeks visiting Madrid, Barcelona, Rome, Florence, hotels with history, meals included, guides who speak English? It's perfect for someone who wants to rediscover themselves." Rediscover herself. The word resonated in Eleanor's chest like a bell. When was the last time she had done something just to rediscover herself? "I'm interested. When would it depart?" "We have a departure on December 20th. You would return on January 10th. Exactly during the Christmas holidays. Exactly when Sarah expected her to be cooking for 15 strangers in her own house. The irony was so perfect that Eleanor almost laughed. "Do you need to think about it?" Emily asked. "No," Eleanor replied without hesitation. "I want to book that trip right now." As Emily prepared the documents, Eleanor felt a mixture of terror and euphoria. It was the most impulsive decision she had ever made, but also the one that made the most sense. For the first time, she was choosing her own happiness over the expectations of others. "I need a copy of your passport and a credit card for the deposit," Emily said. Eleanor took her passport from her purse. It was valid because she had renewed it last year with the secret hope of someday using it. Sarah had scoffed when she found out. "Why are you renewing your passport, Mom? Where are you going to go?" "To Spain and Italy," Eleanor thought with a smile. "I'm going to Spain and Italy." When she left the travel agency with her ticket in hand, she felt like a different woman. It wasn't just the trip. It was what the trip represented, the decision to live for herself. Her cell phone rang. It was a message from Sarah. "Mom, Mark says if you don't cancel that ridiculous trip, he's going to tell his whole family you're selfish and ruined Christmas. Is that what you want?" Eleanor read the message twice. The first time with the old instinct of panic and guilt. The second time with a new, cold clarity. Mark, who had never worked more than 6 months in a row. Mark, who had lived in her house for 3 months without paying rent. Mark, who ate her food, used her electricity, her water, her internet, and now had the audacity to call her selfish. She typed a clear reply. "Tell Mark he can tell his family whatever he wants. I'll be in Europe, so I won't hear him." The reply came immediately. "Europe? Are you crazy? With what money?" "With my money," Eleanor wrote. And then, after a moment's thought, she added, "The same money I've been spending on you for years." Her phone started ringing immediately. Sarah was calling her. Eleanor looked at the screen, saw her daughter's name, and for the first time in her life decided not to answer. She turned off the phone and put it in her purse. She had more important things to do than listen to reproaches and manipulations. She had to buy luggage. She had to check what clothes to take to Europe in December. She had to start living the life she had been postponing for 72 years. As she walked toward the luggage store, Eleanor felt lighter with each step. It was as if she had been carrying an invisible backpack full of stones for decades and had finally taken it off. For the first time in 30 years, she had something to look forward to, and it had nothing to do with making someone else happy. For the next 3 days, Eleanor kept her phone off, not because she was afraid of Sarah's calls, but because she had discovered something wonderful. Silence. The silence of not having to explain her decisions to anyone. The silence of not having to justify why she deserved to be happy. She spent those days preparing for her trip like a teenager, preparing for her first date. She bought a new suitcase, wine red, elegant, and practical. She bought clothes she had never dared to wear, a stylish beige coat that made her look sophisticated, brightly colored scarves, comfortable but pretty shoes for walking on European streets. At the downtown bookstore, she bought a guide to Spain and Italy and spent hours studying the maps, marking the places she wanted to visit. The Prado Museum in Madrid, where she would see for the first time the paintings she had admired in books for years. The Sagrada Familia in Barcelona, that impossible church that seemed straight out of a dream, the Colosseum in Rome, where she would imagine the lives of people who had existed 2,000 years ago, the canals of Venice, where she would have a coffee while watching the gondolas pass by. For the first time in decades, she had something of her own to plan, something that did not involve the well-being of anyone but herself. On the fourth day, she decided to turn on her phone. She had 47 missed calls from Sarah, 12 voice messages, and 23 text messages. She read them all with a calm that surprised herself. "Mom, answer the phone. Mom, this is ridiculous. You're acting like a child. Mark says if you don't change your mind, we're going to have to find another solution." "Mom, Mark's family already bought their plane tickets. You can't ruin Christmas for so many people. I'm very disappointed in you. I never thought you'd be so selfish." "Mom, please, I need you." The messages followed the same pattern. First anger, then emotional blackmail, then victimhood. It was like reading a manual on psychological manipulation. The saddest thing was that for years, that manual had worked perfectly on her, but not anymore. She dialed the number of her friend Beatrice B. Walton, the only person she knew who had always spoken to her honestly, even when that honesty hurt. "Eleanor, where have you been? Sarah called me yesterday asking if I knew where you were. She sounded hysterical. B, I need to tell you something, and I need you to be honest with me." They met at the corner cafe, the same one where they had met once a week for the past 10 years. B, at 74, was still the direct and unfiltered woman she had been all her life. She had been widowed the same year as Eleanor, but had taken a completely different path. She had learned to drive, taken painting classes, traveled with tour groups, and even had a couple of discreet romances. "You look different," was the first thing B said when she saw her. "You look more like yourself." Eleanor told her everything. Sarah's call, the demand to organize dinner for 15 people, her refusal, the trip to Europe she had booked. B listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally until Eleanor finished. "And what do you think?" Eleanor asked. "Am I being selfish?" B laughed, a laugh that sounded like jingle bells. "Oh, Eleanor, do you know how many years I've been waiting for you to have this conversation with yourself?" "What do you mean?" "What do I mean? I've seen how Sarah treats you for years. I've seen how you let yourself be treated, and every time I've tried to tell you something, you defend her. But she's my daughter, B. But she's going through a difficult time. But when you're a mother—" Sound familiar? Eleanor felt her cheeks flush. Yes, it sounded familiar. She had used those same excuses for years to justify the unjustifiable. "B, do you think I'm a bad mother for going on a trip for Christmas?" "I think you're a woman who is finally learning the difference between being a good mother and being a useful mother. A good mother teaches her children to be independent, responsible, grateful. A useful mother does everything for her children until they forget how to do things for themselves." B's words fell like raindrops on dry ground. Eleanor had been a useful mother, not a good mother. She had solved all of Sarah's problems until Sarah had lost the ability to solve her own problems. She had given so much unconditional love that Sarah had learned to take it for granted. But isn't a mother supposed to always be available for her children? "Eleanor, Sarah is 33 years old. She's not a child. She's an adult woman who is married and has her own home. If at 33 she can't organize a Christmas dinner without her mom doing everything, the problem isn't you. The problem is you never taught her she could do it herself. But after Robert died, I wanted to do everything for her. And that was fine when she was 15, but you kept being everything to her when she was 20 and 25 and 30. And now she believes that's your job, that you exist to solve her problems." Eleanor remained silent, processing her friend's words. It was painful to recognize that perhaps she had loved Sarah in the wrong way, that by trying to protect her from everything, she had made her incapable of protecting herself. "B, what do I do if she never speaks to me again?" "Then you'll discover if she really loves you, or if she just loves what you do for her." The truth was simple and terrible, For years, Eleanor had confused being necessary with being loved. She had believed that as long as Sarah needed her, she would love her. But true love doesn't come with a list of requirements. True love isn't conditioned on usefulness. "Do you know what's the saddest thing about all this?" Bea asked. "That Sarah doesn't even really know who you are. She only knows the version of you who solves problems and gives money. She doesn't know Eleanor the woman, the one who has her own dreams and deserves respect." For the first time in days, Eleanor felt like crying, but not out of sadness, but out of relief. Someone saw her. Someone understood that she was more than a maternal function. "Go to Europe," Bea said, taking her hand. "Go and rediscover who you are when you're not being someone else's mom." The next day, Eleanor decided it was time to confront the situation directly. She couldn't go to Europe with the weight of an undeclared war. She needed to talk to Sarah face to face one last time to set boundaries definitively. She turned on her phone and dialed her daughter's number. "Mom, finally! Where have you been? I've been so worried. Mark says you probably hit your head, and that's why you're acting so weird." There it was again. The false concern, immediately followed by an explanation that made her look like a senile old woman. Mark, of course, had a medical theory about her behavior. Mark, who had never shown genuine concern for her well-being. "Sarah, I need you to come to my house. We need to talk." "Talk about what? About canceling that ridiculous trip and sorting out Christmas dinner like adults?" "Come at 3 in the afternoon and come alone." "Alone? Why? Mark also wants to talk to you. He says you need to understand the reality of the situation." The reality of the situation. According to Mark, the man who had lived in her house for 3 months without paying rent, now wanted to explain reality to her. "Sarah, either you come alone or you both leave. I'm not negotiating this." Sarah entered with a look of annoyance, like a teenager who had been unfairly punished. She sat on the sofa with her arms crossed, radiating resentment. "Mom, this has to stop. You're acting like a spoiled child. The whole family is talking about you." "What family, Sarah? Mark's family, who has never invited me to anything? The family who only knows me as the woman who cooks for free for their gatherings?" "That's not true. They appreciate you very much." "When was the last time any of them asked me how I was? When was the last time they brought me a gift, or invited me to eat, or just called me to chat?" Sarah opened her mouth to answer, but remained silent. Both knew the answer. Never. "Sarah, for 5 years, I've been your husband's family's unpaid domestic worker, and for 5 years you've been okay with that." "That's not true. We always treat you—" "What, Sarah? You've always treated me with respect, always considered my feelings, always valued my time?" Eleanor got up and went for her expense notebook. She placed it on the coffee table, opened to the page where she had made the total. $15,000. That's what I've spent on you in 5 years. Money that came from my pension, from my savings, from the money I should be saving for my old age. Sarah looked at the numbers with wide eyes. "Mom, we never asked you to keep track." "You're right. You never asked me to keep track. Nor did you ask my permission before spending my money. You just assumed it was available to you. But we're family. Families help each other. Tell me, Sarah, how have you helped me in these 5 years?" Silence. A silence so profound you could hear the ticking of the wall clock in the kitchen. I'm always here when you need me." "When have I needed you, Sarah? Give me an example." More silence. Sarah was desperately searching her memory for a time when she had given instead of received. "When you were sick, when I was sick with the flu last year, you didn't come to see me even once. I found out later you had been at the spa with Mark's friends." Sarah's cheeks turned red. "It's just, I didn't know you were that bad. I sent you 3 messages saying I felt very sick. You never replied." "Mom, you can't nitpick every little thing now." "They're not little things, Sarah. They're 30 years of little things that accumulated into this, into a relationship where I give everything and you receive everything, and the day I decide to set boundaries, I'm the bad one." Sarah began to cry. Not the genuine cry of someone who understands the harm they've caused, but the manipulative cry of someone who knows tears have worked before. "Mom, you can't leave for Christmas. You can't leave me alone with this problem." "Sarah, you created this problem. You told Mark's family I was going to cook without asking me. You assumed my house, my time, and my money were at your disposal. This isn't my problem to solve. But I don't know what to do. I don't know how to cook for so many people." "Learn. Hire a catering service. Order food. There are 100 solutions that don't involve me. That costs money. And my work doesn't cost money, does it?" Sarah wiped her tears and changed tactics. "Mom, if you do this, Mark is going to be very upset with me. He says if his family feels unwelcome, it'll be my fault." "Then maybe it's time Mark learns to solve his own family problems instead of delegating them to his mother-in-law." "You can't talk about my husband like that." "I can, and I will. Mark is a 35-year-old man who has never organized a family gathering in his life because he's always had women do it for him. First his mom, Brenda, now me. When is he going to grow up?" Sarah stood up from the sofa in a fury. "I see what's happening. You're jealous because I'm not just yours anymore. You're jealous of Mark." The accusation was so absurd that Eleanor almost laughed. "Sarah, I'm not jealous of Mark. I'm tired of being his free domestic worker." "You know what, Mom? Go on your stupid trip. We'll sort this out without you. And when you come back and feel lonely, don't come crying." Sarah stormed out, slamming the door so hard the whole house shook. Eleanor stood in the middle of her living room, breathing deeply. For the first time in 30 years, she had said exactly what she thought, and the world hadn't ended. The following days passed in a strange calm. Eleanor expected to feel guilty. She expected doubts, remorse, the little voice inside telling her she had been too harsh with Sarah. But that voice never came. Instead, she felt something she hadn't experienced in decades: peace. She woke up each morning without the anxiety of wondering what problem of Sarah's she would have to solve that day. She ate breakfast in silence, reading the newspaper from cover to cover, something she hadn't done in years because she was always rushing to solve some family emergency. She took unhurried walks in the park, observing details she had ignored for years. The autumn colors on the trees, elderly couples feeding the ducks, children playing with a freedom she had forgotten existed. One afternoon, while organizing her clothes for the trip, the doorbell rang. She expected it to be Sarah, perhaps coming to apologize, perhaps coming to make one last manipulative attempt. But when she opened the door, she found Brenda, Mark's mother. Brenda was a 68-year-old woman, elegant and cold, who had always treated Eleanor with distant courtesy. In 5 years of knowing her, they had never had a conversation that lasted more than 10 minutes. "Eleanor, sorry to come without warning, but we need to talk." "Of course, Brenda, come in." Brenda entered and sat on the sofa with the rigid posture of someone who had come to perform an unpleasant mission. "Eleanor, Sarah told me about the situation, about your decision to go on a trip for Christmas." "Yes, I'm going to Spain and Italy. It's something I've wanted to do for years." "I understand you want to travel, but don't you think the timing is inappropriate? We already have everything planned. My family already bought their plane tickets." Eleanor studied Brenda's face. There was no malice in her words, but there was that automatic assumption that others' plans were more important than her own. "Brenda, can I ask you something? In these 5 years, how many times has your family invited me to something?" Brenda blinked. She clearly didn't expect that question. "Well, we've always appreciated you opening your home for family gatherings." "That's not what I asked. I asked how many times you've invited me to something, to your house, to a restaurant, to a celebration where I was the guest and not the hostess." The silence stretched. Brenda looked at her hands, clearly uncomfortable. "Eleanor, we always thought you enjoyed being the hostess. You're such a good cook, and your house is so welcoming." "Brenda, for 5 years, I've cooked for your family every Christmas, every birthday, every special occasion. I've spent thousands of dollars on food, decorations, gifts. I've cleaned my house before and after every gathering. I've washed mountains of dishes, and in 5 years, no one in your family has genuinely thanked me. But Eleanor, last year, at Christmas dinner, your sister Carol criticized my turkey, saying it was too dry. Your brother-in-law Elias complained there wasn't enough beer. Your son Mark burped at the table and then fell asleep on my sofa while I washed the dishes. Is that appreciation, Brenda? Brenda blushed. She clearly knew that everything Eleanor said was true, but she had never thought about it from the hostess's perspective. Eleanor, I hadn't realized. Of course you hadn't realized, because for 5 years, all of you have seen me as part of the furniture at family gatherings. The woman who cooks, cleans, and pays, but who doesn't have her own feelings. That's not true. Brenda, tell me something. Do you know my favorite color? Do you know what kind of music I like? Do you know if I have hobbies, dreams, interests that aren't cooking for your family? Brenda looked at her with wide eyes, clearly realizing she knew absolutely nothing about Eleanor as a person. I hadn't thought. Exactly. You hadn't thought. Because for your family, I'm not a person. I'm a function. Brenda remained silent for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice sounded different, smaller. What can we do to fix this? Nothing, Brenda. You can't fix 5 years of disrespect with an apology, and I don't want you to fix it anymore. But Christmas dinner can be at a restaurant, at your house, at Sarah's house, or anywhere that isn't mine. For 5 years, you have taken for granted that my house was available for your gatherings. This year, you will learn to make other plans. I know we've made mistakes, but don't you think cutting all contact is extreme? I'm not cutting all contact. I'm setting boundaries. I'm telling you that I'm no longer going to be your family's unpaid domestic worker. Brenda stood up to leave, but before reaching the door, she turned around. Can I ask you something personal? Of course. Have you ever been happy doing all these things for us? The question hit Eleanor like a punch to the stomach, not because it was cruel, but because it was genuine. And the answer was devastatingly honest. No, Brenda, I haven't been happy. I've been so busy being useful that I forgot how to be happy. Brenda nodded slowly, as if finally understanding something important. I hope you find that happiness on your trip. After Brenda left, Eleanor sat in her kitchen with a cup of tea. For the first time, someone from Mark's family had recognized that she had a right to be happy. It was a small step, but it was something. She looked at the calendar on the wall. 5 days until her flight. 5 days to leave behind 30 years of being the woman who solved others' problems and start being the woman who lived her own life. The phone rang. It was Bea. How's everything, Eleanor? I think I'm finally learning the difference between being needed and being respected. And how does that feel? Eleanor smiled, a genuine smile that no one could see, but that could be felt through the phone. It feels like freedom. The day before her flight, Eleanor woke up with a feeling of anticipation she hadn't felt since she was a child waiting for Christmas. She had everything ready, her suitcases carefully packed, her documents organized in a special folder, the perfect clothes for every occasion she had imagined. But more important than all that, she had something she had lost decades ago. Hope. She bathed calmly, chose her favorite dress, the terracotta color Sarah always criticized, saying it made her look too flashy, and put on makeup in front of the mirror, not to look younger or to hide wrinkles, but to celebrate the woman she had rediscovered. Every line on her face told a story, and for the first time in years, she was proud of that story. As she ate her last coffee at home for breakfast, the doorbell rang. Her heart skipped a beat, thinking it might be Sarah coming to make amends, but when she opened the door, she found something completely unexpected. An older gentleman, elegant, with flowers in his hands. Mrs. Eleanor Vance? Yes, that's me. My name is David Hawthorne. I'm Emily's father, the travel agent who organized your trip to Europe. Eleanor looked at him, confused. Why would Emily's father be at her door? "Emily told me about you," David continued with a warm smile. "She told me you're a brave woman who's going to travel alone to Europe for the first time. And I'm also planning the same trip, the same dates, almost the same itinerary." Eleanor felt her cheeks flush. "And I was wondering if you'd like some company, not for romance or anything pushy," he quickly clarified, noticing the surprised expression on her face. "Just to have someone to share a meal with once in a while, someone to take your picture when you're in front of the Leaning Tower of Pisa." It was so unexpected, so outside everything she had imagined for her trip, that Eleanor didn't know what to say immediately. For months, she had visualized this trip as her declaration of independence, her moment of chosen solitude. But there was this man, David, offering her something she hadn't considered, company without obligations. "I don't know what to say. I wasn't expecting this." "Emily showed me a picture of you when you were at the agency, not to invade your privacy," he hastened to explain, "but because I had told her I hoped to meet interesting people on the trip. She told me you had a smile that showed strength and sadness at the same time. That description intrigued me." Eleanor truly looked at David for the first time. He was probably 75, with neatly combed silver hair, kind eyes behind elegant glasses, and a posture that spoke of dignity without arrogance. He was wearing a brown wool sweater and well-pressed trousers. He wasn't handsome in the traditional way, but there was something about him that radiated calm and respect. "Can I ask why you're traveling alone?" "My wife died 2 years ago. Cancer. During the last year of her illness, I promised her that if she left before me, I wouldn't stay home feeling sorry for myself. I promised her I would travel, that I would see places, that I would live for both of us." His voice softened. "This is my first big trip without her." Eleanor felt an immediate connection to his story. Both were escaping versions of themselves they no longer wanted to be. Both were looking to rediscover themselves in distant places. "And what do you hope to find in Europe?" David smiled. "I hope to find the man I was before I became just Maria's husband. I hope to remember what I liked to do when I wasn't taking care of someone else." The words resonated in Eleanor's heart like bells. It was exactly what she had been feeling but hadn't known how to express. "David, I have to be honest with you. This trip is very important to me. It's the first time in 30 years I'm doing something completely for myself. I don't want to compromise it with romantic expectations." "Oh, Mrs. Eleanor," he interrupted gently, "I don't want complications either. I just want the possibility of sharing an intelligent conversation once in a while and having someone tell me if I have food in my teeth after eating pasta in Rome." Eleanor laughed, a genuine laugh that surprised herself. It had been so long since she had laughed like that, without reservations, without worrying about how it sounded or if it was appropriate. "You know what, David? I think I'd like that company." "Seriously?" "Seriously, but with one condition." "Tell me." "Each of us pays our own expenses. No old-fashioned chivalry where the man feels obligated to pay for everything. I have my own money, and I want to use it." David smiled more broadly. "Mrs. Eleanor, I think we're going to get along very well." He gave her the flowers, white and yellow daisies, simple and beautiful, and left, not without first giving her his card with his phone number and the details of his hotel in Madrid. After he left, Eleanor stood with the flowers in her hands, feeling like a teenager. Not because David was a romantic interest, it was still too soon to think about that, but because someone had seen something more in her than a useful mother or an available grandmother. Someone had seen an interesting woman. She put the flowers in a vase and placed them on the kitchen table. Tomorrow she would be on a plane to Madrid, and for the first time in decades, she didn't know exactly what to expect. That uncertainty that once would have terrified her now excited her. The phone rang. It was Sarah. "Mom, your flight is tomorrow, right?" "Yes, tomorrow." There was a long pause. "Mom, I don't want you to leave angry with me." "I'm not leaving angry, Sarah. I'm leaving free. Can we talk when you get back?" We can talk when you're ready to truly listen. Another pause. I love you, Mom. I love you too, Sarah, but I'm no longer going to confuse love with unlimited availability. After hanging up, Eleanor prepared her last dinner at home before the trip. Nothing elaborate, just a simple soup and a salad. She ate slowly, savoring each bite, aware that tomorrow she would be dining in Madrid. For the first time in 30 years, she had something that was completely hers, a future full of possibilities. 3 weeks later, Eleanor was sitting on a small terrace overlooking the Mediterranean in Barcelona with a cup of café con leche that tasted exactly as she had dreamed it would. The late Mediterranean sun caressed her face as she wrote in a new journal she had bought in Madrid, something she hadn't done since she was a teenager. Day 21 in Europe, she wrote in careful script. Today I understood something important. Happiness is not a prize you receive after years of sacrifice. Happiness is a choice you make every day. David approached with 2 ice creams, a lemon one for her and a chocolate one for him. During the 3 weeks, they had developed an easy and comfortable friendship. He was a perfect travel companion, cultured without being pretentious, funny without being a clown, attentive without being intrusive. They had walked together through the Prado Museum, gotten lost together in the streets of Rome. They had laughed together when he tried to speak Italian with a Spanish accent and ended up asking for shoes with cheese instead of pasta with cheese. Writing your memoirs? David asked, sitting in the chair next to her. Writing my new story, Eleanor replied, the one that starts at 72. Her phone had rung several times during the trip. Messages from Sarah, some desperate, others furious, others manipulative. The first few days she had read them all, feeling pangs of guilt, but gradually she had developed a new perspective. Sarah's problems were no longer emergencies she had to solve. They were lessons Sarah had to learn. The last message she had read, sent 2 days ago, was different. Mom, we had to cancel Christmas dinner. Mark and I had a big fight about who was going to take care of everything. In the end, we decided we weren't ready to organize something so big. His parents are disappointed with us, not with you. I think I understand a little better why you left. I hope you're doing well. Eleanor had read that message 3 times. She felt no triumph or satisfaction, just a quiet confirmation that she had made the right decision. Sarah was learning, perhaps for the first time in her adult life, that actions have consequences and that there wouldn't always be someone else to solve her problems. What are you thinking about? David asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. That for 70 years I believed my worth as a person depended on how useful I was to others. I believed love was earned by being indispensable. And now? Now I know that true love doesn't have to be earned. It either exists or it doesn't. And people who truly love you don't disappear when you stop being useful. David nodded. During the 3 weeks, they had shared many deep conversations. He had told her about the years he spent caring for Maria, how he had gradually lost his individual identity in the process of being the perfect husband. She had told him about 30 years of being the perfect mother until she realized that perfection had made her invisible as a person. Do you know what's the strangest thing? Eleanor said. During this entire trip, I haven't cooked a single meal for anyone else, and I don't miss it. I thought I would miss it, but I don't. What do you miss? I miss the version of myself that existed before I became a maternal function. The woman who read books for pleasure, who had her own opinions about movies, who dreamed of traveling. That woman was asleep for 30 years, but she wasn't dead. The sun began to set over the Mediterranean, painting the sky with colors that had no name. Tomorrow would be her last day in Europe before returning home. But home no longer sounded like a prison. It sounded like a place where she could continue to be the woman she had rediscovered on this trip. David, can I confess something to you? Of course. When I was young, before I got married, I wanted to be an art teacher. I never told anyone because it seemed like a silly dream. After I got married, after Sarah was born, after Robert died, there were always reasons to postpone that dream. And now I think 72 years is not too late to be who I always wanted to be. David smiled. You know what? I have a confession too. I always wanted to learn to play the piano. Maria used to say we were too old to learn new things. What do you plan to do about it? I think I'm going to buy a piano. They laughed together. The laughter of two people who had discovered that life doesn't end when you turn 70, that perhaps, in some strange way, it's just beginning. That night, Eleanor stayed awake in her hotel room, looking out the window at the lights of Barcelona. Tomorrow, she would return home, but not as the same woman who had left. She would return as Eleanor Vance, not as Sarah's mother or Mark's former domestic worker. She would return as a woman who had learned that saying no wasn't selfishness, it was survival. Her phone vibrated. A message from B. "How's the new Eleanor?" She replied. The new Eleanor is learning that it's never too late to start a new life. The next day, on the plane back, as she watched Europe disappear beneath the clouds, Eleanor wrote in her journal, "Today I don't need permission to live. Today I know that respect is not begged for. It is demanded. Today I understand that freedom is not doing what you want, but not doing what you don't want. And tomorrow, when I land at home, I will begin the rest of my life." She closed the journal and leaned back in her seat. For the first time in 72 years, the future belonged entirely to her. It wasn't revenge, it was liberation, and it felt exactly like flying. 6 months after my return from Europe, I am sitting here in my new art studio with hands stained with acrylic paint and a heart lighter than it has been in decades. I never thought that at 73 I would be learning to mix colors and discovering that I have a natural talent for painting landscapes. The house feels different now. It is no longer a place where I await desperate calls or unexpected visits asking for favors. It is my sanctuary, my space, where every object is where I want it to be, and every decision is mine. The silence no longer frightens me. It embraces me. Sarah and I talk now, but differently. At first it was difficult. There were tears, reproaches, mutual accusations, but something changed when I stopped defending myself and simply maintained my boundaries. She had to learn to relate to me as a person, not as a resource. She is still learning, but there is progress. She asks me how I am before telling me her problems. She invites me to lunch without expecting me to pay the bill. These are small changes, but significant. Mark. Well, Mark is still Mark, but he's no longer my problem. Sarah is slowly learning that her husband's problems are her husband's responsibility, not her mother-in-law's. It has been a costly lesson for her, but a necessary one. David visits me once a week. We drink tea, share stories from our classes. He did indeed buy his piano and is learning to play Chopin, and sometimes we go to the movies like two friends who enjoy each other's company without complicated expectations. I don't know if someday it will be something more, and for the first time in my life, that uncertainty feels beautiful instead of distressing. I have learned that self-love is not selfishness. It is emotional survival. For years, I confused sacrifice with love, thinking that the more I gave, the more I would be loved. Now I understand that true love blossoms when both people respect each other enough to maintain their individuality. My bank account has grown. When you stop being the family bank, it's incredible how much money you save. I've used some of those savings to remodel my house, for my painting classes, for small luxuries I used to consider unnecessary. A monthly massage, new books, fresh flowers for my table, things that make every day feel like a celebration of being alive. The most surprising thing has been discovering that I wasn't invisible. I had simply stopped seeing myself. When I started to value myself, others also began to do so. My neighbors greet me differently. The butcher asks me about my paintings. The librarian saves art books especially for me. I have learned that setting boundaries doesn't destroy relationships. It either improves them or eliminates them, and both outcomes are good. Relationships that improve become more authentic. Those that are eliminated probably weren't worth keeping. Some days I feel sadness for the lost years, for the woman I was who believed herself indispensable when in reality she was interchangeable. But that sadness no longer paralyzes me. I accept it, embrace it, and then let it go. The past taught me. The present belongs to me. I look at my hands as I write this. Hands that cooked thousands of meals for people who took them for granted. Hands that cleaned messes I didn't make. Hands that signed checks for others' dreams. Now these same hands create art, write their own thoughts, applaud personal achievements. The woman who boarded that plane to Madrid was a retired domestic worker who had forgotten her own name. The woman who returned is Eleanor Vance, artist, traveler, friend, a complete woman who doesn't need anyone's approval to validate her existence. I still wake up every morning without knowing exactly what the day holds, but now that uncertainty is exciting, not terrifying, because I finally learned the most important lesson of all, that I deserve to write my own story and that it's never too late to change the ending. If you enjoyed my story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can write more stories like this. Thanks a lot in advance. What about you? What would you do in this person's shoes? I'd really love to hear your thoughts, so drop them in the comments. I'm always curious to know what you think. Oh, and let me know where you've heard this story. If you want to hear more life stories like this, like the video and subscribe to my channel. There are many more waiting for you. Big hugs, and see you next time.